Welcome back. I'm Calvin Statue Fanatic, and I'm super excited to share something that's been in my collection for a very long time with you guys. And many of you already know that The Nightmare Before Christmas is my all-time favorite animated movie, bar none. Love it. My favorite Disney movie, all of that crazy stuff. And what I want to do in this retro review, that's right, this is my second retro review, is share something with you from my collecting history that I have had for a very long time. I cannot tell you how many times these figures over my military career and now that have been packed up and unpacked. And if you were closer here, you could probably see some of the wear and tear, but I love every last one of these pieces and I would never part with any of these. Nope, they're not $3,000 statues, not at all. But there's something that brings me an enormous amount of joy. And that is why I always say collect what you like and not the hype. And you'll never care about what it is or what people say. So a little bit about these figures here, because when The Nightmare Before Christmas, the movie, was released, Disney was afraid that this movie would not be a big hit. They were so afraid, in fact, that they didn't even release this movie under their Disney title. They ended up releasing this under Touchstone Pictures, a more mature title, because they weren't sure if parents or kids would take to this movie at all. And another really cool thing about the toys here is that when they released this movie, this is only the second time in Disney's history where they released a movie and did not have enough merchandise in the form of toys to support it. The second time, or the first time it happened, was in 1977 when they released the original Star Wars. Now, when it comes to these figures, the movie came out in 1993, and at that time, like I said, no figures were available at launch, I don't think. And what happened was the movie ended up being a modest success. It ended up, I think, 18 million was the budget, and it ended up making somewhere around 75 million in the US, and then worldwide, $100+ million, something along those lines. I may have the figures messed up. I'm going to actually leave a really cool link to an article about these toys in the description below. But back to the toys themselves. When I saw the movie, I fell in love with this movie. I thought it was an amazing, creative, imaginative movie, but Disney wasn't so sure that most people would feel that way, so much so that they even, for the first time, Tim Burton's name was used to market this movie. Most people, if you would have asked them just off the cuff in a trivia type thing, who directed Nightmare Before Christmas, they probably would say Tim Burton. They would be wrong. Henry Selick was the director of this movie. They attached Tim Burton's name to the movie because of the 1980s success of Beetlejuice, and then you had 1990 Batman, you had I think it was around the same time Edward Scissorhands came out. And then, of course, in 1992, you had Batman Return, all huge successes. So they marketed this movie as Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. Although he was the writer and creator of these characters, he did not direct the movie. Now, as far as the toys are concerned, the initial release had only a dozen toys, a dozen action figures. The ones you see here and the three here, Lock, Shock, and Barrel here. I'll go briefly over each of the toys that initially came out. You had the werewolf that came with a stand. In fact, each of these smaller figures came with a little stand. You had Behemoth that came with this axe, I think, in his head. You had the clown with the tearaway face. His head actually spun around. You had a very popular figure that came out and was really hard to find, and that was Oogie Boogie. He glows in the dark and has some bugs inside of him. And then you had Sandy Claus, that's S-A-N-D-Y, Claus. You had this big jolly fat guy right there. And then, of course, over here you had two versions of Jack. You had him as you could transform him into the Pumpkin King by putting these pumpkin heads right over his head. And you also had him here as Sandy Claus. You had Sally that came with her little purse, and then you had the evil scientist. These were the initial release of the characters. And then later you had Hasbro, I think it was, that released, let me make sure here. It was Hasbro that released a few other figures, which was the dolls here. You had Jack, yeah, I just called them dolls, didn't I? You had Jack with Zero. You also had Sally. You had Sandy Claus again, which was an actual puppet, a finger puppet. And then you had this big, flush, puffy Oogie Boogie over there that had some creepy things inside of him as well. Cool thing about these figures, if you notice, some of the tags are still on them because right after the movie came out, no figures being available, and then they came out kind of the next year, the demand may have gone down some for the figures. So it was really, really easy to find these figures in discount bins. Some of you guys remember KB Toys and of course Toys R Us. You could find these at TGNY. There were a number of places that you could find these toys. And as you even look here, I have Okie Boogie where I bought him from Walmart. He was slashed half off for $20. And even this figure here went down from like $7 to $2.99 at the time. And Oogie Boogie, $11. Many of these figures were in discount bins because the demand for the movie kind of dwindled, and it still was a success in terms of finances. Not so much when you compare it to like I guess a Lion King or Beauty and the Beast. Now fast forwarding a little bit into the future, like in 2004, this somehow took off. People became just obsessed with Nightmare Before Christmas. These figures on eBay just went through the roof, insane prices. Like this Oogie Boogie figure right here, $300-400 to buy the figure. The same thing with the larger figure of Jack, $200-300 to buy. These figures themselves, anywhere between $100-150. Oogie Boogie being one of the most expensive, and Santa Claus also, Sandy Claus also being very difficult to find, in the hundreds of dollars. At that time, Disney kind of realized that they had a really big merchandising hit on their hand, and they started licensing these characters to be redone through other companies. And one of the first companies to pick it up was NECA in 2004 to 2007. NECA produced a lot of figures because the market did become a little bit saturated with Nightmare Before Christmas stuff. A lot of these figures, the prices calmed down and came down. They're still a pretty penny to own all of them, but nothing the way it was back in the early 2000s to be able to own these figures. And now you have other companies that came out with something, I think it was a company in Japan or Korea called June Planning, came out with a lot of figures. They were at stores like Goody Music and a lot of stores that aren't even in business anymore, specialty shops. And Hot Topics was another company that you could find a lot of the merchandising for Nightmare Before Christmas from. It's kind of a gothic shop, which makes sense. And now you have Diamond Select that has picked up this license, and I think they're on their 8th series of the toys. And Diamond Select has done a really great job with the toys that they are producing for Disney and producing for this particular franchise. This franchise has become a marketing behemoth. I mean, everything Nightmare Before Christmas. If you go into CVS right now, or Walgreens, I think it is, they have an entire section of snow globes and Halloween stuff, all dedicated, all licensed product dedicated to Nightmare Before Christmas. But I'm very happy to say that I was on the Nightmare Before Christmas hype train before it was even cool. So very, very happy. And the reason I'm smiling so much is that this is, like I said, the example of collecting what you like and not the hype. I've had these things for so long and they just continue to bring me joy. They're just a beautiful set of action figures that have a lot of meaning and memory to me. They're probably going, I don't have a place that I can store them. I actually had to go take them out of storage and things like that. But very, very happy to own these pieces, and to see them all laid out like this just warms my heart. So remember again, guys, always, always, always collect what you like and not the hype, and you will be one happy, happy, happy collector. So until next time, my friends, peace.